early Tuesday morning, they're all tired already.
Weekends are tougher than weeks.
Some days, sometimes.
Okay, you're going live.
Okay, great. All right, this is Senate Natural Resources and Energy. And it is Tuesday, April 15th. Hope everybody has their taxes done. And good for you. Well done. And we are starting the morning off talking about stormwater, and we have the new executive director from the conservation districts with us this morning. Welcome. Particularly since this is your first time with us, maybe we'll do a quick round of introductions and then we'll let you take it away.
Good morning, I'm Senator Ruth Hardy from the Addison District.
Jerry Waits from Rutland District.
In Watson from the Washington District, and anticipating we'll be joined by Senator Bongartz from Bennington and Senator Beck from Caledonia.
Okay, well, I'm Michelle Monroe. I'm the incoming executive director of the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts, and I left Senator Welch's staff to take this position beginning of March. And one of the reasons that I, left the U.S. Senate to do this work was that I spent 18 months working with our flooded municipalities and our flooded farms across the state, and I wanted to be somewhere where I felt that I could make a difference in actually helping them with flood mitigation and other projects. So one of the reasons that we're here today is because our natural resource conservation districts do stormwater projects across the entirety of the state. And most of the funding for that work comes from the Vermont Clean Water Fund. And so, as I'm sure you've heard from just about everyone who's coming to you, we support the repealing the sunset of the surcharge on the property transfer tax, as all of our partners do. But we are concerned about setting aside $1 million every year from the Clean Water Fund, specifically for the 3-acre compliance. And the reason for that is that no other group of permittees get a specific carve out within the Clean Water Fund. And we feel that this is a really dangerous precedent. In fact, a few years ago, Senator Kitchell wanted to provide funding for the conservation districts out of the Clean Water Fund and set aside $1 million for the districts every year out of the Clean Water Fund. And we said, we very much appreciate your support, Senator, but we don't think that that's the right solution. Because that money really needs to be flexible. The Clean Water Board and the secretary need to be able to adjust the spending year to year based on realities on the ground. Literally the realities on the ground is what's happening and where we need to be focused on the landscape itself, but also what's happening with the broader funding picture, particularly now with what we're seeing at the federal level, and when no one really knows what that's going to do to funding, or more we're going to need to pull money to make up for some of those shortfalls. So I just we don't think that it's a good precedent to set to have the legislature carving out money within the Clean Water Fund, that those decisions should be left up to the Clean Water Board. And in the process, well, ultimately, of course, it's the secretary's decision, but the Clean Water Board should be able to make recommendations based on what they're hearing from the public, based on the scientific analysis that's ongoing. It should not be something that the legislature does, because the next thing that's going to happen is everyone's going to come to you and say, please carve out some money and really water fund for us. So that's where we stand in that, and that's the primary reason that I wanted to testify. We don't oppose the $5 million in time allocation. We're okay with that. Just the ongoing annual allocation. And then on the study committee piece, we believe we have a lot of expertise to bring to the table with that discussion, because we are regional governmental entities, and we do stormwater projects across the entirety of the state, and our district managers have a great deal of expertise on stormwater. And we're doing that right now, often in partnership with the municipalities. We're frequently with folks on ground that are helping them figure out how they address the erosion problem, how they fix it, how they reestablish a floodplain, where they need buffers, what they should do about culverts, what culverts they need to upgrade, increasing size, because the state, of course, the state engineers work primarily on the state roads. So our smaller municipalities in particular often lean on us for assistance with their town roads, particularly like class 3 roads. So that's why we think we would bring some valuable expertise. We also want to agree with our partners at the Vermont Association of District Planners, that the committee should examine options for expanding use of natural resource-based approaches to managing stormwater. And also, look at the jurisdiction of the 3-acre permit, because when it was created, it was really aimed at large sources, private landowners with large amounts of impervious surface that had been built before we had stormwater permits and kept getting grandfathered and didn't need stormwater permits. And so there was a lot of stormwater coming off of these lands, but no stormwater permit requirements because of when they were built. And so that was really the intent and the purpose behind the 3-acre permit. So it's not entirely clear to us how we ended up with the fairgrounds and the regional and like all of these small residential developments included in the 3-acre permit. So we think that that's something that the committee might want to take a look at potentially. And also looking at prioritizing both enforcement and support for compliance around projects permittees that are actually hydrologically connected to waterways. You know, if your stormwater is simply dissipating and it's not actually running into the stream and contributing to nutrient loading or stream destabilization, then we don't believe that we need to, that should be a priority for enforcement or for funding with compliance funds. That's my testimony. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions? This way, yes.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the bill and I think the section you're talking about where the sort of the funding is prioritized. No, actually,
It's page 9.
is it page 9? Okay, oh, I see. I'm wondering, so there are lots of tiers in this, yeah, thanks to my lovely former seatmate. So I'm wondering, and I see that it does specifically say, you know, there has to be at least $1 million for this purpose. I'm wondering if you think having that for a certain amount of time would be more better. Sorry, brain fog a little bit today, but would be better because you know, we want to prioritize getting these projects done and having people have the funding support for it, but I hear you maybe in the long term. But how about a sunset date?
I think a sunset date would be preferable to no sunset date. But our concern is always, you know, where is that to making sure, part of the charge of the Clean Water Board is to make sure that we're getting the greatest bang for our buck. And so I don't want to see us putting money into areas where we're not going to get the same amount of bang for our buck. We need to be sure that we're getting the highest return for every dollar we spend because we have a finite amount of dollars. And so that's my concern, is that by having this carve out, we may end up doing projects that, while worthwhile, are not going to get us the same amount of nutrient reduction that we would get on other projects.
Right, yeah, I mean, that's my concern too, just sort of overall, and I appreciate your point about, you know, the intent when this was done. I remember very specifically the conversation in this building was like parking lots, not mixed residential, you know, neighborhoods. And so, and it seems to me that we would get more bang for our buck by concentrating or focusing on those giant parking lots for a variety of reasons. And to some extent, they are focusing on those. So how do we, and I don't know if you watched, I think it was Friday, but we had DEC and we're talking to them in more detail about it. You should watch that conversation we had. You have seen it already.
I am not, but I will definitely take a look at it. Yeah, that's our concern as well, is that enforcement should really be on those projects that are contributing a lot of stormwater off of their impervious surface. And that's one of the reasons that I think the allowing municipalities to assume responsibilities is a good provision of this bill, particularly for places like downtown Rutland, where there's no place to infiltrate stormwater, but they've got a lot of 3-acre permittees. And I know that I've had conversations with the mayor in my previous role about their plans to address that. So I think that there are definitely municipalities that can assume some of that responsibility in really heavily developed areas with lots of impervious and no real options for infiltrating that. But again, I think it would be worthwhile to potentially have the study committee examine the breadth of this permit and the breadth of the number of the people who are being asked to get this permit and to determine if it's appropriate to have those residential developments be created or permittees.
Yeah.
We don't want to see the permit go away entirely, not at all. But I think the question of the scope of the permit and where it's appropriate is something that the study committee could consider.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
No, I'm a little confused because I'm not familiar with the organization.
Oh, sure.
But, you know, we're asking, you're talking about $1 million that isn't enough money. And if we give it to the municipalities to do, they're saying, VLCT says it's gonna take hundreds of millions of dollars. So, and we're actually all trying to do the same thing, just to get the clean water. So if my common sense says, we gotta go back and find some more money.
Yes, yeah, we're not opposed to more money, but it is a finite pot.
Right.
And so I think what our position as the folks who are really on the ground doing this work all across the state. You know, we're doing stormwater projects in every corner of Vermont. And so what our position is that money just needs to be flexible so that we can spend it for the highest good for Vermont, so that we can get as much nutrient reduction out of each dollar spent as we possibly can. That's been our position, even when to our own detriment. But that's our,
And then the city of Rutland has a plan
yes, they
for
do.
their flora restoration plan, that's to put a Band-Aid on it until we can get money, not to fix the problem. And they want to put in, I think, 12 million gallons of storage,
Yeah,
which makes sense, they got a place to put it, but they need money to do it,
yes,
so.
they do.
So, you know, I think that's the beauty of Vermonters, is that we all come together and we take what we've got and we try and figure it out, but we're putting Band-Aids on something that we need a turn to. You know, maybe not that bad, but, you know, the first thing we have to do is stop the hemorrhaging. And then you know, that goes back to my point about prioritizing the list that we've got, rather than trying to, you know, put a Band-Aid on everything that is gonna be millions of
And
dollars.
as Senator Hardy referred to, the Vermont Clean Water Act created the Clean Water Fund, and in there are priorities laid out, but no specific dollar amounts, which gives them, except for tax-based planning, which supports the overall work of DEC and all of us actually who were doing stormwater work, like we're all referring to our tax-based plans when we're doing good work. So that makes sense to us as a carve out, but we need to be able to move money where it's.
If we go back to the federal delegation, try and find some more money. They're the ones that laid it on us.
Be like,
Yeah,
maybe
that's
we don't really.
I know I personally am in frequent contact with my former colleagues, although I cannot lobby them for a year, but
I mean, our stormwater,
Yeah.
our stormwater, not stormwater, but our wastewater treatment facilities were built in the 60s. And they don't have the capacity, so, and they were built with federal dollars.
And the bipartisan infrastructure law, the IIJA, included a hefty chunk of money to upgrade an increase in the money going to the state revolving loan funds, so that they could do more wastewater and clean drinking water programs and upgrades to those systems across the state and across the country. But the need is so great, not just in Vermont, but nationally, because they were all really built in the same period in the 80s. The federal government was actually in the 70s, because Richard Nixon tried to stop it because he opposed the program. But the Congress passed out, after they passed the Clean Water Act, they set aside a huge amount of money to build wastewater treatment facilities, and to upgrade existing wastewater facilities, and they paid 90% of the cost of those projects. Yeah, so that's where most of Vermont's wastewater infrastructure was built at that point, or was upgraded.
So maybe we need to put a dollar amount on it and do whatever.
We can ask.
I think now is not the time to ask the federal government for any money.
Not
We
at all.
gotta get in line.
Right, any other questions? So one of the things that came out. I was also thinking about putting some kind of a time limited offer on this extra $1 million. And just to say it out loud, it made me wonder about, like, can we obligate a future, does it run afoul of like obligating a future legislature to, you know, commit money to something, but maybe because it's a special fund, maybe it doesn't work like that, so. Take it out. Yeah, that's true. Okay, great, any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much, yeah.
Thank you. I advocate time.
Yeah, absolutely. And wondering if we are joined remotely by Mr. Otis. Marky is not here yet.
I am.
Oh, you are here.
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. So we were not able to get Mr. Otis in last week, so we're fitting him in today.
It's on the iPad, I think.
So you can put it first, we can just check your volume.
Can you hear me right now?
We can, and let's see.
Jude, are you able to adjust the volume where you are, or do we have to do it in the room?
You have to do it in the room.
Let's view it.
Okay, Senator Von Garcia to kind of figure it out.
View. Okay, can you say something else?
Yes, can you hear me now?
One more time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, great. All right, welcome, Mr. Otis.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Watson and members of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee for this opportunity to appear before you. My name is John Otis, and I own a condominium at 50 Freedom Drive in Montpelier. I am here as a condo owner and a board member of the board of directors for the Third Grease Farm Condominium Association, where for the past 5 years, my duties have included stormwater compliance. I am here to give testimony on those portions of House 41 that are applicable to 3-acre sites. I respectfully ask for the chair's indulgence to allow me to briefly explain the 3-acre impact on the 4 condominium associations located just a couple of miles from where you're sitting right now. The 4 associations are comparable in number of units and impervious area. In and of themselves, none of the associations has 3 acres of impervious area. However, the 2 Third Grease Farm condominium associations are grouped with the city of Montpelier to form the Third Grease Farm 3-acre site. It consists of 4.11 acres of impervious area. So why are we coming today? Our associations have been complying, the Third Grease Farm Association have been complying with stormwater requirements since the middle 1980s. Our general permit 3-90 increases the portion of our annual budget from 1% to 12% to comply with the new runoff requirements. Our association share of the estimated $250,000 cost of construction and penalty fees amounts to an estimated $100,000, which could be spread over the next 5 years, but obviously the construction cannot. Just a few years ago, our total budget amounted to close to $100,000. How about the other 2 condo complexes, First and Second Grease Farm? They have benefited from an immunity to the stormwater runoff mandates. They both have impervious areas, but what they don't have is their acreages aggregated for the purpose of compliance under stormwater requirements as we have. Now, in House 41, in paragraph 1264, Bull Legs D, Bull Legs 2, there is an expression of fundamental fairness that's absent from our situation, where the reference states, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good, please carry on.
Go ahead and continue.
Oh, no, I don't think we have any questions, I think you're good to carry on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
The reference I was citing reads, the municipality may assess municipal impact fees on users of the stormwater system, provided that a majority of property owners subject to the impact fee, consented, and the impact fee assessed is a fair apportionment to the user of the cost of improvement in accordance with the benefits that the user received. Again, in paragraph 927, which talks about the Developed Lands Implementation Program, it provides financial assistance to persons who are required to obtain a permit to implement regulatory requirements. Now, thus far, the funding has been only provided for the design of the projects. I'm proposing, in addition to lines 7 and 8 in that reference, paragraph 927, that currently reads, this program shall fund or provide financing for projects related to the permitting of impervious surface of 3 acres or more. The recommended change that I'd like to have inserted before the word permitting would include the words design, construction, and permitting. What this would do is align the current program with the same fundamental fairness expressed in section 10 of House 481, where it reads, the study committee shall, in Blue Lakes 3C, propose how a regional stormwater utility district could be eligible for Clean Water State Revolving Fund awards and access state-level financial assistance for the design, construction, and operation. So in the future, when you're working with the municipality, they're looking for opportunities to fund the design, construction, and operation. But currently, the 3 acre sites only have funds available for permitting. Now, in order to offset a portion of the funding to implement the changes associated with funding construction, as well as permitting design, I propose a change to section 927, just ahead of the last sentence, that adds the words, the Department of Environmental Conservation will conduct a review of 3 acre sites and delete those 3 acre sites where multiple property owner or associations have been grouped for the state's convenience so as to fall under the 3 acres of impervious area mandates for stormwater runoff. The elimination of these groups for 3 acre compliance would enhance justice and fairness by eliminating neighbor-on-neighbor controversy and the significant emotional toll that the inequities are taking that Senator Chitton mentioned to you in his testimony just 2 weeks ago. Finally, I have pointed out how House 40, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. I think, yeah, no question at this point.
Finally, I pointed out how House 41 stresses the importance of fairness and equity, and is not the case with our Greaves Farm associations. We have 132 units in the Greaves Farm associations and their little horseshoe right off Northfield Street. 64 of those 132 units are being tasked to comply with stormwater requirements, and the remainder have no stormwater requirements. On multiple occasions, we have written to the DEC only to be rebuffed each time. And recently I sent a letter to Senator Watson outlining our predicament. And now we are seeking the support of you to help us in our efforts to achieve some semblance of fairness, equity, and justice as it relates to stormwater. You know, I can just thumb through House 481 and I can find terms like property owner's consent, fair apportionment, appropriate allocation, equitable, cost effectively and equitably. Those terms just don't apply to our situation. So finally, both Third Greaves Farm Associations seek your support for our plight as stormwater issues continue to have significant impacts on homeowner association and municipality budgets. And that's by formal comments, and I'm available to answer any questions that you might have on anything that I've said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I want to first off by saying I really appreciate that you had really specific suggestions. That's very helpful. It's great. And I am wondering if you would submit your comments in writing since they had such. Oh, you got it. Okay, great. Okay, so we have it. Fantastic. Other questions that folks might have for Mr. Otis? Okay. Super. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and we're hoping that we can tackle some of these issues that you pointed out.
And thank you to each member of the committee. I appreciate the time that I've had to spend with you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now it's extremely warm down here in Florida, but I understand you might have snow tomorrow, and I don't want you to have snow tomorrow. But, that may be the case.
I feel sorry for us.
Thank you. Well,
Okay.
thank you. All
Thank you
right.
very much. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. All right, so we are running ahead of schedule, which is great, but I think I saw that, Ms. Piper is with us digitally, am I correct? Okay, wonderful, hello,
Hello.
yay, so, I just wanted before we move into this section, we have been having a great conversation with Mr. Kamen about 3 acre stormwater. We were not able to get him for today, but I'm hoping to have him join us tomorrow to continue to talk about that. And then anticipating that I'd love to continue to walk through 481 and would love to get to a place where we're ready to vote on this, hopefully this week. That is my goal. So that's just to put that on everybody's radar. And I know, Ms. Piper, that like the stormwater is not your area. So we're gonna, yes.
I won't be ready to vote on it until we get the information that I requested from Mr. Bateman. So I,
Oh, with the prioritization?
yeah, and he was gonna, I asked for a bunch of different things last weekend or last week, and I feel like that is necessary before we figure out a path forward on it.
Okay. Fair enough. Hopefully, we'll see what he has tomorrow.
Okay,
And thank you.
yeah,
Well, I appreciate knowing that, and we'll keep, because I feel like there's more to be said about this. And just so you all know, based on some of the testimony that I have, I've started to put together some potential amendments, particularly to the study. So I'll have some thoughts to share on that soon, place to start. So happy to have more conversation about that.
So-
I mean, and also acknowledging that like we are gonna start to run out of time at some point, so we
Yeah.
start, I don't think we know for sure when the last day is, but we're gonna start to have to do some backwards planning to make sure we get everything out, so.
yeah,
Go ahead, Dee.
So I just want to, if we got time today and we get through our witnesses, I'd like to discuss it. Cause I got a couple of recommendations.
Oh, for 481. Well, maybe since we're on it right now, and we are running a little bit ahead of schedule, if you'd like to share, we'd love to, hear your thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right now?
yeah, let's do
Okay,
it.
so I'm hearing from constituents that are on the list. And they're like, you know, we've already done our due diligence. We got the permit, we hired the engineer, we've done everything except the construction. We'd like to be included in some of that money.
Mhm.
So if there's some way we can go back and identify the people that have paid in, that didn't take advantage of the money that was available.
Mhm.
I'd like to see that happen.
Sounds like some of these folks could use some support
Right,
financially right now to get these projects done.
right.
Are they a part of a neighborhood, or are they just individuals?
Sure.
Um,
And they accepted the task and they
Mhm.
went out and hired somebody to do it.
mhm.
And they did, then the money, that $49,999 came available. I don't think they took advantage of that.
Mhm.
So they were saying, hey, I hear you guys coming up with some money, I'm gonna put a little my way.
Yeah,
That's why I said, if we go through back and refine the list. you
Yeah.
know, who's-
well, it might be interesting to see what, my understanding is that people, like individuals are able to access some of these funds, but it might be a cumbersome process, so it might be worth asking about what that process is like. Well, since we're here talking about any other thoughts folks would like to share about the stormwater bill. I can go through the list of things that are on my radar for
Sure.
potential amendments.
Just for me, the thing that really is the situation where, yes, there's 3 acres there. But how much of that water is really getting to anywhere? They're surrounded by acres of grass and swale and. I just. these projects are expensive. And the state's gonna, you know, it doesn't seem like low hanging fruit to me in some of these situations. I'd rather send the money to the low hanging fruit will really get bang for our buck.
And Mr. Burke admitted when I asked if they actually physically gone to these sites, that they did, they had. So some, maybe now when they came up with the list, but maybe now they have, but we've heard testimony where, you know, we do have a system that is surrounded by grass and, you know, working, the water can't possibly be affecting anybody else downstream, so.
But like I said, I wanted to get some more information from Neil Damon, particularly, I mean, I agree with what Snre said, and I'm really concerned about the pressure that this program is putting on housing. In a time when we have a housing crisis, and I'm worried that it's going to make people lose their homes and then not have those homes be affordable anymore because of this sort of outstanding permit problem. And that was never the intention. I mean, Senator Beck, you and I were the only two here. I mean, I remember the sort of conversation in the building was like parking lots. This was gonna be like big parking lots. I don't remember anybody talking about like, well, in 2019 is when we did the funding part of it.
Yeah.
Nobody was ever like, oh, this housing development is gonna be impacted. So one of the things that I asked Mr. Payman about was, you know, if we took the roads out of those, would they still be 3 acres? Because the roads are already permitted, so kind of like trying to redraw the lines to say, oh, actually, without the roads, they're not 3 acres. And the roads are permitted under the general roads permit already. So,
Except for that permit covers different things, like it's the practices are different, but.
I hear you, but there's stormwater permits, and if you take the roads out, then the housing part of it might not actually be 3 acres, and I wanted to know how many of those that exist. And also, if there are low hanging fruit that would get us more stormwater bang for our buck that are like 2.75 acres. You know, or whatever, that could be easier to permit and deal with and prioritize. And maybe those are the big parking lots that are right next to a stream, and that would be better, but they've just fallen underneath that 3 acres. So basically, like, can they rerun their model? Because I know this comes through a modeling exercise, which I fully get and I appreciate. This is like mathematical and scientifically based, I get it, but you can always rerun that model with different parameters. Cause I, like, again, I just am very worried about what it's gonna do to housing costs in our state, and we're just battling that already, we don't wanna add to it.
And if we started out with 3 acres, and now I think Act 181 talks about 1 acre down to half an acre, but they have. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, it's gonna be affecting new construction. According to that act, from what I read. And this should.
That's a different situation, but.
Right, well, if you're gonna do anything, if you're gonna build a house and there's already an acre of pervious surface on that, then you're gonna have to apply for a permit for that too. So, maybe down to a half an acre, so we're just the tip of the iceberg, this isn't gonna stop at 3 acres, even if you take a half acre of road on 3 acres. You know, we had one guy that I talked to in my district that said, I resurveyed and I only have 2.9 acres, so I'm off the list. And he is, but he still has some pervious surface.
So coming back to what you were saying, Senator Hardy, so you're not necessarily suggesting that we try to get that budget of phosphorus from a different sector, just thinking about who is in and who is out within that sector.
Yes, within the stormwater sector, are there ways that we can meet the target for that sector?
what are other options?
with different options, with different parameters. And I know once you change the parameters, there'd be a lot of other people who are mad,
Right.
who are now in, and that's why I think having this, you know, I wanna hear from A and R what is possible.
Mhm.
And then maybe we task this, and I don't know that this is the right study committee for that, I think it's actually like. You have a study committee that looks at these broad issues, but then we task A and R with coming back to us with more detailed
Maybe with like a report.
report on rewriting their model with different parameters, and. I don't do this stuff, so it's possible that Neil comes back and is like, you're not Senator Hardy, you can't do that. But it just seems to me like hearing all this testimony, the pressure on housing developments is too much, and we should not be doing this right now.
Mhm.
That it's not gonna get us enough benefit to make it worth it to what it's gonna do to people's housing.
Right, how can we increase the value per dollar spent even within this sector? That's
Yeah.
kind of what I feel like I'm hearing you say.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I mean. And just looking at the ones that are on the list in my town, I'm surprised what's not there.
Mhm.
And maybe it's because they're 2.9 acres or something like that, and you know, not to say that again, I understand more people will be upset, but if there's funding available and there's technical support available. And we can do those for cheaper and easier,
Mhm.
then maybe it's better to do that.
Fair enough, and coming back to what you were saying, Senator Beck, what I feel like I was hearing you say is maybe go back to try to get the phosphorus reduction from some other sector, but I'm not sure if I was hearing you correctly.
Yeah, or within the, you know, the parking lot, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Instead of going to a housing development and that. Now, this is a housing development that's pouring lots of water into the system, that's one thing, but if it's surrounded by grass and meadows and swales, it just doesn't feel like. We're gonna do much good for the money we're gonna pour into this.
So thinking about what the conservation district this morning said about the hydrological connection,
Yeah.
some facts, or not fact,
I think what's a well way to put it is just prioritize it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And that's what I'm thinking about, is how to prioritize. That's, I think a lot of information is key,
Mhm.
as well as the proximity and. You know. It does seem like we're talking about massive amounts of money that we don't have, and so we need to prioritize.
Yeah.
Have that be what we're really trying to accomplish.
And I had asked Neil to redo that list that's from 2020 that you gave me and. See if we can sort it differently so we can look at it with different. I mean, I would just love to have that spreadsheet, so I can do that myself, but if he can come back and with different sort to get an idea of where we're really at, how far along are we? Cause we may be. It feels like we've done the low hanging fruit, have done the middle hanging fruit, you know, and these are just the high hanging fruit that are
Yeah.
possible to get without a really good ladder, I don't know.
Yeah, so the things that are on my radar include investigate how other states are addressing stormwater from residential and commercial properties. Recommend a path for compliance for neighborhoods in which not all the homeowners are willing to form an HOA. That feels like something, a theme that we heard. Recommend guidelines for equity in dealing with uncovered, not in properties that are upstream. You're having to process somebody else's stormwater, basically. And then investigate any other options for dealing with orphaned permits, and then potential prioritization of properties. And we can spell out either some potential options or leave it up to them or whatever, but then if we have some prioritization, I would also be interested in some staggered deadlines to roll with the prioritization. Yeah, so those are the things that are on my radar, but also let's ask more questions. And I did hear from Jude that we don't have, we may be able to get Mr. King on Thursday. So It's pushing things back a little bit, but there we are.
Can you just make sure he's gonna come back to us with information that we asked for last week?
Next, see if he can get that together for us by
Yeah.
Thursday, yeah. Okay. Thank you, so that's, wrapping up things about stormwater. Before we jump back into 319, which is about, well, we have, Ms. Pfeiffer with us, who's the River Corridor and Floodplain Protection Manager, so thinking about, particularly in 319, the deadlines that have been pushed back, and would love to chat with you about that, but want to open it up to you if you have anything else that you want to share with us before we jump into that question. Actually, I need a second to transition myself here.
Well, for the record, my name is Rebecca Pfeiffer. As Chair Watson introduced me, I manage our River Corridor and Floodplain Protection Program at the Agency of Natural Resources. I haven't prepared any testimony because my understanding was that it was meant for question and answers. I always have slides and information that I'm happy to share and always willing to share, but I don't know if that's helpful for you today. But I'm here to answer any questions that you might have on H319 and questions about deadlines around Act 121, the Flood Safety Act.
Yeah, great. So thinking about the river corridor mapping that is happening, so we're pushing out some deadlines. I'm on page 20, well, I guess it starts on page 21. It goes into 25, 26. Some of these are pushed out a year. There's one that is particularly pushed out 18 months. So that's on page 24. This is about river corridor rules. Dock rules, and this is. Would you mind just like telling us about why 18 months?
Sure, yeah, I think that Rob Evans, who is our Rivers Program Manager, had previously testified and is here today as well if you have any questions from him. I think the general thing when we testified in the 2024 session, when Act 121 was being drafted and developed, one of the key pieces that we underscored is that these deadlines at that time hadn't been our preferred deadlines. They were passed, we'll work towards them, but then we also had indicated if we have additional flooding, we understand that that will delay it because our group, both our floodplain management team, and our science team are involved in post-flood recovery. And so we indicated if we had additional flooding that those timelines likely would need to be pushed back because we'll be busy doing response and recovery from the flood events. And then in 2024, we had more declarations around Christmas time. We had flood declarations, and then in 2020, in the summer of 2024, we had the July 10th flooding again, July 30th flooding up in Lyndonville and St. Johnsbury area. And so we've had several very large flood events that has, again, just pushed our timelines back. So we've been recruiting positions. We were given positions to support this work. We've been recruiting those positions through the fall and winter. We have folks who are onboarding and starting now. So we're just that much delayed by flood response and recovery.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Rebecca. I think the chair was trying to make the point that all the other deadlines are being pushed out a year. This one's being pushed out 18 months. And so what's the difference between this one, which I understand is dealing with riparian corridors? Why does this one require 18 months when the other ones are a year?
I actually would probably put that to Rob as to the difference in those timelines. I think when the agency we had generally put 18 months or a year for timelines. The permit requirement is the one that's pushed out 18 months as to when we would begin and implement issuing permits under an updated flood hazard area and river corridor rule or FARC rule. And likely that is just to have, again, time to advertise and to consult with other stakeholders, account for potential for additional flooding, but I'll also pass it over to Rob Evans if you have anything you want to add.
Thanks, Rebecca. And for the record, Rob Evans, Rivers Program Manager at ANR DEC. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, I think there's a couple of dimensions to why 18 months. I mean, I think just kind of widening the lens, first of all, to the full body of work with the Flood Safety Act. It's a tremendous amount of work. It's 5 buckets of work that subdivides out into almost 30 subtasks. So it's just a lot that you're asking of us. And there's work to be done that the legislation is silent about. And a key bucket of work is what happens between once we're finally done with rulemaking, it's been adopted, it's gone through the ICAR, LCAR process, and then actually issuing permits under that rule. We still would have to update our general permit to account for the full suite of development and activities. That general permit update and amendment is also a public process that gets noticed publicly. We take public comment. Depending on feedback, we're drafting responsiveness summaries and potentially further amending or making refinements to that general permit. So that takes time. We'll need to significantly upgrade our databases for map amendments and revisions, as well as permit tracking to deal with the expanded workload. That will take time. And it's also recognizing that there could be additional things we're not even aware of right now in terms of rule amendment. One of the things that the Flood Safety Act has us doing is this National Flood Insurance Program Study Committee to evaluate the extent to which we, the state, may take over some or all of municipal permitting from towns. Remember, that was an initial proposal in the last session, and it morphed into the study committee. That study committee might come up with recommendations to make additional refinements or amendments to our rule. So it kind of builds in some slop into the timeline there. And then lastly, to bring it full circle, every time we get a big flood, regional or statewide, add 6 months to Flood Safety Act work. And over the next 3 years, we're very likely, given our changed climate, to get additional significant flooding. So it's really accounting for all of those dimensions, if that makes sense or is helpful.
It sort of makes sense, but you still didn't really answer my question. So just looking at the timeline in the bill, it's moving out the Map River corridors permit development till January 28th. And then rulemaking authority to July 28th. And then we skip a whole year to the permit starting in July 29. Seems to me that it makes more sense to stick with the January 29. You have 6-month increments between each of those phases. So I haven't heard any explanation that's compelling for the 18 months delay. I've heard the delay overall, that makes sense. But sticking with those 6-month increments between each thing, because you're gonna have the rules done and then you're gonna wait a whole year before you implement the permits that those rules are requiring. So that seems to delay the issuing of permits for longer than necessary.
Yeah, I guess I'll chime in there. I think to underscore what Rob said, I think that bigger gap in there is really to recognize the time that it will take. So you pass and update the rule, but then I think to do the other work to support actually issuing the permits is the key piece of what the extra 1 year is for. So developing a general permit is its own 6-month timeframe, and we wouldn't update the general permit until the rule is passed and adopted, because we wouldn't develop a new general permit until we have a final rule. And so that general permit process is its own 6-month process in itself to update. By the time you draft, with notice, comment, is a significant amount of time. I think the other big thing, just to underscore, is the floodplain aspect of it. I think a lot of the focus has been on river corridors and river corridor legislation. But the legislative committee, which is part of Act 121, will be bringing in recommendations for the rule update, but then there'll have to be that time of basically advertising and outreach to communities, because those timeframes aren't 100% synced up. So there's the legislative committee, which will report back for potential proposed changes in legislation. If those are then integrated into the FARC permit, that won't necessarily be in the same timeline as the outreach that is required under the River Corridor outreach and education in municipal stakeholder outreach. And so I think that's the recognition, is that extra year is the recognition of both the general permit update, which is about a 6-month process in an ideal world, and then also kind of socializing the updates to the floodplain rules and regulations and what role the state would play if there's anything that is adopted and passed by the legislature.
Okay, you just made the case for an extra year, not an extra 18 months. So I'm not sure that. I don't find your arguments compelling, but that's okay. Maybe it's just me. I think that you made the case clearly for 12 months. You have not made the case for 18 months.
Well, I guess so the rulemaking authority that's proposed is July 15th of 2028 to adopt the rules, and it has the permit requirement a year out. That's July 2029. So a year between the rule being adopted and then doing the general permit, 6 months, and then again the implementation and socialization of the floodplain regulations. So that's 1 year between the adoption of the rule and implementing permits and issuing permits.
I think I'm understanding that because these things are sequenced, right? Like you have to do the rulemaking first, and you're pushing the rulemaking out a year. And the
So I
rulemaking.
think I'm sorry.
No, and so the rulemaking is pushed out a year, and so this permit requirement is pushed out a year after that.
I mean, it's pushed out 18 months. I mean, whatever, it's not a huge deal. I just feel like it doesn't.
Yeah.
The case you're making is for 12 months, not for 18 months. I have not heard the 18-month. And maybe you're saying, and I'm just not understanding it, but yeah.
Well, for Senator Hardy, I think the big thing is what Chair Watson had spoke about, which is that sequencing. So it may be 18 months from the originally drafted legislation, but I think the key piece is that we're looking at when the rule would go effective with the new proposed timeline and the time between that and when we would actually be issuing permits, which I think is the key piece of what we're looking at, which is saying a rule is adopted, and then from that point to actually issuing permits, a year would be the difference in the gap. So it may be 18 months from the original legislation, but in terms of the work between the rule being adopted and issuing permits is about a year's worth of work in terms of updating the general permit and the work that goes into that, outreach on that, and then doing the socializing of the floodplain standards that would likely also be integrated into that.
As well as multiple database updates, also coming up with a fee schedule for permits and revisions. That requires statutory change. That might lag in terms of our fee authority until after we're issuing new permits, but we should be still letting people that are now newly regulated be aware that permit fees are coming. So again, it's recognizing that there's a lot to do, and could we do it in 12 months? Potentially. Giving us 18 months sets us more up for success, but ultimately that's your call as the lawmakers.
Yeah, and I think the key piece is that if we did a 12-month delay in the actual issuing of permits, that would be 6 months after the rulemaking is, identified to end. So it would be a 6-month gap between the rule being adopted and then implementing these different aspects of it.
So what I feel like I also hear you saying is that the original delay between the sequencing was not enough.
Yes.
Okay, and separate from that, so you have some positions, you're just hiring folks now. Would adding any more positions, help speed any of this work up?
I mean, I'll leave that to Rob. I think the big thing with positions is that in terms of recruiting and hiring and onboarding, it's a significant amount of work and time dedicated to it. So there is kind of that uptake, that's what we're in right now is kind of recruiting and onboarding. But I'll leave that for Rob to answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure new positions would speed it up. I mean, the new positions are essential to be sure. And there's critical both development work ahead of issuing new permits that they will be assisting with, as well as the work once we are issuing new permits. But the reality is some of this stuff, especially when it comes to rulemaking, that's left to more senior staff like Rebecca and myself. So that we just can't completely load that on more junior staff with less experience and expertise and all of this. So at least for now, I don't think new staff will make this go any quicker. I think the real question, and it kind of goes back to a fee structure and schedule years down the road, is does the fee structure, is it set up such that given permit volume and map challenge volume, that we can pay for additional staff to support the work if we need more staff over and above what you've already provided us. But that's years down the road at this point.
Okay. Any other questions for either Ms. Piper or Mr. Evans? Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you. All right, I would. I feel like we should take just a quick break before we jump into the discussion of the budget letter. And we'll go from there. So let's take a 5-minute break.
You mute the room staff, and you mute the.
No, you have to do it there.
Yeah, I mean, I asked Senator Bongartz if he could do it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Do it on the iPad, just,
Where's the?
I think it's the red.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, so this is again, Senate Natural Resources and Energy coming back from a quick break and jumping into discussions about our budget letter. I believe you have the shell of a budget letter. It's sort of got it's got placeholder language, it's got committee bills, underfunded mandates, and nonprofit asks. Left it largely blank because I wanted to have a discussion, see what folks are thinking about and wanting to prioritize. And we've also got some emails either recently about asks from folks. So what I would like to do is just go around and see what is rising to the top for folks in terms of your priorities and see what kind of overlap there is. And just, I know in the house, there's often like a box or thresholds or caps to knock over. We don't have that. In a way, having a cap would make it easier. But we don't have that. So I think at this point, we could say, what is it that are our priorities, and try to temper them as reasonable, but otherwise we don't have constraints. With that, do folks have a sense of what you are hoping to see in our budget letter? Yes, go ahead.
I'll go with looking over
Mm-hmm.
and including money for to make the two positions that are ARPA positions permanent. And because it's critical of Southern Vermont, we would have be without anybody.
Yeah.
We don't have. So Pete maybe fill in the blanks a little bit, will it dollars led. And then I think the order also simply for operating digitizing systems, but I think it's really with losing the people that are there when the ARPA dogs would just be like kind of like so all the things people don't like to try process would be.
So I have for the two district coordinator positions, that is being 375.
Yes.
Where are you
So-
talking about it?
So
I'm not seeing it.
no,
I don't
that's
see that at all
not,
either.
let's,
So no.
yeah, I also just have a note, actually, appropriation request, so I think I can forward this.
Is this on the secretary's list
It
here?
is not, this is separate from, Mr. Gill, so. Okay, I'm gonna forward this to the committee. I'm gonna include Jude on this as well. So that we can get it posted. Okay. And just to be clear. Let's see, parts heard. So digital infrastructure for the LURB at approximately 100,000. And then I had 145 per position per year until 2029. So. Can I ask you to speak to that really
Sure.
quickly?
Yeah, Pete Gill, Executive Director of the Land Use Review Board. So yeah, we have our estimates for those positions are about 145 per year. So if it's we had originally looked at this and looked at it in terms of our study in 2029 to make sure that we had funding up until that point when we look at the LURB and see are these large changes that you all made to Act 250, is that increasing or decreasing? How is that affecting our permitting workload so that we can continue those services for Vermonters that way? And so that's how we have broken it down. And that's inclusive of health costs, et cetera, those other costs, of course, in those numbers.
Wait, so are you asking for 1 or 2 FTEs?
So we have two positions that are ARPA funded. And those are going to be going away 12/31 of this year. Without.
Okay, so it's a half of the year for 2 positions, essentially.
Well, this is where it's where it gets to the critical nature of the work that they do. These individuals, it takes over 6 months to get them up to speed. We have these individuals in the position, trained and ready to go. We would like to be more efficient in that by keeping those individuals on board rather than training.
Right now, I understand that, but you only need half a year of funding because they are funded until December.
One is ARPA funded until December, yes.
Okay, I think I'm understanding your request now because, so you need half a year for one of them. Because there's 2 positions, so you need half a year to get to December, and then you're trying to get to 29.
Yeah, that's the time when the study is due to review the staffing report.
So. Okay,
But we only budget on
yeah, on 1
fiscal
year, yeah,
one year, so you just need 1 half-year position and 1 full-year position. Would you have 2 positions right now?
So we have 2 positions currently right now.
And when are they both funded for? Until December, or is only
So-
one funded through December?
We're actually a little low on funds, right? To be honest about it.
Okay, you can't come in and ask for a budget request and actually have your numbers in order. That's not good. So I need to see the numbers before I can support something.
Yeah, so we, what we need to do right now is just fund one position. If we can make that full-time, that would be ideal for our program. That gives us the consistency, the ability to move forward, and not have that delay in terms of hiring somebody new, getting them up to speed, et cetera. That would be the ideal. We realize that we're not in an ideal climate right now in terms of funding, et cetera. So we're trying to be understanding of that. But I want the committee to understand that these are really critical positions to our program, and we want to ensure that they can continue forward.
did you have a question?
Just so I understand, FTE, is it a state employee or, and this is gonna be permanent forever? Not gonna go away?
That would be the ideal request.
Okay.
We have 2 positions right now, they're ARPA funded. If we can convert that to 1 permanent, that would work for our program.
Sorry, so did you say 1 position? Okay, so 1 FTE at 145? Okay. And then
There was another 50,000.
And so on the house side, they had the house environment had proposed an additional 50,000 to help the board, and we would request that would be a more flexible amount that we can adjust staffing to help with the board's overall work. As you know, the board is working on the tiered system. They're working on taking in future land use maps, making the permitting process overall more consistent and predictable by doing that through the system that you all had set up last year, and funding to allow them to operate more effectively. I think it'd be.
I mean, it's getting more effectively. My understanding is a lot of it was about digitalization.
We need to be able to take in those applications from the RPCs when they're delivering them to us. from the municipalities when they're requesting tier 1A status. We want that to be an effective and straightforward process for folks. And we can hobble something together that could do some of that. But to have a streamlined, effective program, we need funding to make that happen. And that's that digital infrastructure as well as personnel cost to help the board.
That's that 100,000.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So you're looking for 145 plus 100.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, yes, good.
Based on their written request,
Mhm.
what it sounds like is that they have 2 positions that are funded through the end of December.
Mhm.
We gave them 145,000, that would fund 2 half-year positions, because that's what they need.
Mhm.
They can be limited term employees through 2029, because that's what they say they need them for this project that's due in 2029. So to Senator Williams' point, they would be limited term positions, not permanent positions. Through 2029. And then $100,000 for the mapping digitization thing, so that's 245,000. And 2 limited term employees, FTEs.
That's,
Yeah, I mean, so and not to be confusing, I mean, our ask has changed a little bit as you know, the new board was seated in January of this year, and they're now a few months into that seating and understanding a little bit more of the needs of the organization. And I think they've understood that despite, you know, our written ask originally, that really given the structure that we have now and their understanding of where we are as a program, that the permanency of that position is critical.
noted. Thank you.
Because one of us served as a coordinator.
Mhm.
Yes, one of those, and that's where I was saying, we're, you know, trying to juggle funds as effectively and efficiently as we can, and one of those areas is taking one of the ARPA positions, one of the individuals in those positions is going to be serving as a coordinator
In the
in the District 7 office.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else for you, Senator
No,
Roberts?
that's correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Senator Beck?
No, I think I understand what that's the one. Just reading your letter,
Yep.
letter from them.
And anything else that you would want to advocate to see in the budget letter?
Well, I have some questions about, so down here, the nonprofit funding,
Mm-hmm.
okay? I see that serve, learn and earn, 2.5 would be a $500,000 increase. I suspect over what they received last year.
Mm-hmm.
And the conservation district requests of 3 million.
Yes.
Their base right now is 650,000.
So their last year was 612,
Okay,
and then the governor's recommend was 500, so a reduction. The House put it back up to 612.
okay,
But they had asked for 3 million, and that
Right.
was going to be, I believe, half position for every one of the districts.
right.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, so in our letter,
This is just placeholder. We don't have, well, whatever.
well, no, I'm just
Yeah.
want to make sure I understand the process here that you guys are using.
Mhm.
So this is basically, all we're telling appropriations right now is, this is what they're requesting. Are we going to make, a recommend or?
Well, we could say we want to increase their base funding from
612 to.
612 to
Okay.
3 million, or any other variation, you know, one time or
So
whatever.
is that something that we will do in our final letter to appropriations or?
Right,
Okay.
yeah, I
just
mean,
wanna make
that
sure I
could,
understood.
yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
That's the point of this exercise.
okay,
Yes.
so right now we're just kind of collecting our thoughts, this is what they're asking.
right,
Okay. got it.
exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
Anything else? You're just gathering information right now, like.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I
Okay.
understand what's in the letter and
Yeah.
everything, yeah.
Yeah, mostly just wanting to see what people want to advocate for, to see what what we want to have in the letter. Senator Hardy, things that are,
Well, I think it might have been helpful to get Secretary Moore in to talk about this. Because the theme this session has been, you guys have asked us to do a whole bunch of things, we're gonna have to push out the deadlines. And, I would kind of like to understand that better, to see what could make a difference to the agency to do all the things that we've asked them to do. I mean,
I
yeah,
have thought on that, but I don't want to stop you.
no, that's okay, go ahead.
My sense was that there was a second memo, not the one that says overview of recent ANR unfunded mandates. There was another one that, let me see which I believe is posted, because the overview of underfunded mandates was a little bit older. That was just kind of an overview.
Okay.
Then the other one was, okay, so given all of that, what would their priorities be? What would they like to see changed in the budget? And that is not, it's not exactly like her coming in to say, here's what we'd like, but that, of the two documents, that is the one that,
And what day is that posted?
And it's this right here.
it's not that one. Let me see if I can.
Cause the ones that are posted under her name is this one, the overview.
There should be another one. Not seeing that. I thought I had forwarded that to you all, but I can bring that back up here.
You sent us a bunch of things.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, on Friday. The 11th at 10:47 PM.
yep. I get all my best work done.
You sent, so she does outline.
Yeah, I have it as a letter, is that,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's dated April 10th,
Get such a list.
Friday, the 11th.
Okay.
At 10:47 PM from the Center Watson.
and I can, in case it is, I'm going to forward this on to Jude as well, to make sure that she got it. Okay. So. As I read this, their top thing was funding for PCB remediation. Cause it had been, the recommend had been 9.5, the House knocked it down to about half of that. And then, there's a lot of work to do. So that was the first thing. The second thing was funding for climate super fund. Then it was Act 181, with the Act 181 is the Act 250 reform bill. And then about ARPA dollars, getting those.
So Act 181 is
It's a lane sweep, so it's just.
this is the problem with having the act numbers. When
Yeah.
you work
Yeah.
on them, but is that
Figured out the bill.
is that the
Biodiversity is.
No.
It's just the active.
Act 250.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
this sounds like it's the biodiversity, because
Right.
what she's
Well-
saying is 2 positions for fish and wildlife.
Because they're the ones that are doing a lot of the implementation on A&R side with uh the tiers and the mapping and the,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So the agency would prioritize those positions over the positions for the LURB.
No, I don't think they commented on the word one way or the other.
They might be separate.
Oh, they're separate?
Yeah.
Well. Okay.
We can also, I want to check back in about this, that's fine, might go to, is it okay if we come back to you, Senator Hardy?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know you were on me.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I just would like to understand this better and be helpful to have her come in. I think that, the conservation districts, first of all, I don't think they're nonprofit organization. They are government entity and are,
Yeah,
so,
right, they don't belong in the nonprofit.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and I remember asking them specifically, they are created in statute and they are a state entity, so. That's a little bit different, I think we should provide them funding. And the climate super fund, I think we got some good testimony about, you know. The work that needs to come first and doing that, the first work first, so. I think it was the treasurer's office stuff, so I would. If we're able to put that in our recommendation for the, specifically for the treasurer's department office, to start there.
Mhm.
I think if they were here, they would also be saying that having one staff attorney. For the agency is just as important. I don't know if I agree or not, but I would say that we're, that having one, and want more of one. Lay down box that we're looking for along with, one for the treasurer's office. So not saying we should or shouldn't do it, I'm saying that's what you did, so I think they'd say if they were here.
Yeah, because the bigger ask was an additional 500,000 for contracted services for A&R to do, basically tracking the liability and figuring out who was liable for what. So, just in terms of the priority within that, I agree the treasurer's work is, I think, the most important.
Yeah, that's what I've heard from multiple people, so
Yeah.
if we can put that in.
Mhm.
And then the conservation districts. They have a 612 base in the house budget,
Right,
right?
yeah.
I mean. I'd love to be able to give them 3 million, but that seems out of reach in this budget climate, but maybe. You know, 1.2, which would be double what they have in the house budget, I don't know, Senator. That, what do you think?
So 3 gives them a half.
Well, let's double check that.
Yeah.
And actually, we have someone from, oh no, it's.
Oh, no.
Certainly, okay.
Fine. If, or, an additional half, no, half person district or kind of up to a half person.
Sounds
So you know what? we're
Very
ready.
familiar. So who was it that came and testified for us?
Well, we've had Dan Kahneman come in.
Yeah.
I think there've been a couple of people. I did get an email about this with their budget request.
Dan Keenan, he's not on our list.
Actually, I can forward this to you all. This was their ask. Okay. Right, so I just forwarded you all. Base 23 million base. Two conservation districts.
So $3 million would give them 4 FTEs. Is what they have.
$500,000 will give them 4.
Sorry, can you say that, or somebody can you say that?
Well, they're asking for 4 FTEs and $3 million, so, but it doesn't, they say.
So it's really for core administrative staff to be per student.
Doesn't. This. Perhaps. We can. It'd be great if we could get some more information from them about like specifically what this is asking for, like what it is for.
Well, there's a table on the
Mhm.
second page that is pretty good, actually. So it,
Oh, it's right, because it's 35,000 per district, but there's 14 districts.
yeah,
Okay, so that's, I think maybe that is where I was seeing the half for all 14 districts. Okay, nice. And then just an additional 2 million on top of that.
That table is good.
Yeah.
but I mean, I think that. You know, their base funding right now is 612. They're asking for 3 million, which they acknowledge is a big jump, especially in a budget year like this. If we say, you know, we can double your base, that's still a giant jump, so like
Yeah.
1.2224, you know. Just
Yeah.
double the 612 and then
Yeah.
they can allocate it as best they can.
And can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's $3 million.
Yes.
Half a position for each.
So the 3 million is what would support one full-time position at each,
Oh, full-time position.
yes, and that's
Conservation.
each of the 14. The 3 million would support one
Okay.
FTE at each district, which is really what they're looking for. You have likelihood the 1.25 number.
Mhm.
That was recommended by the House Environment Committee to support 0.5 FTE
Oh, okay, that's where I was getting.
and each of the 14.
14 conservation.
Yes,
Yeah. Thank you for magically appearing.
Okay.
that's what we did.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's consistent with what we were just talking about, is 1.2.
1.2.
Yeah,
Would be-
1.224 with doubling their base.
Okay. Okay. Noted. At 1.2.
1.2.
2.2, yeah.
Yes.
Doubling
Yes.
ABC.
Mhm. Yeah, great. Super. Senator Williams, thoughts? Anything you want?
You lost me in the dust.
Oh, no.
I don't know whether about finance or appropriate. I'm listening and learning.
No, it's all good. Well, same, honestly, as we work through this process. So, okay, what I am hearing so far, unless there's other things people want to chime in about, what I hear people advocate for is, a total of 245 for the LURB. Which would be 100,000 for digital, infrastructure, 2 limited service positions, split up basically for half a year to finish, out the year. And then, the treasurer's work around, the kind of super fund stuff, the conservation districts going to 1.2, and then, yes.
Going back to the blurb, I think we would want to have language if can, making one of those 2 positions base permanent.
One of them be based.
Because they need to know in order to keep them, that it's a base position,
Mhm.
and it's gonna be in the budget. Because that position, without it, someone wants to get in trouble.
And thoughts on that? I don't have strong feelings about that, really, I was trying to go. Okay, just want to know, in terms of the priorities that A&R mentioned, I mean, the first one that they listed was getting back to the funding for PCB remediation that had been cut by the House. I would love to see us continue to, we've scared a whole bunch of people in schools and would love to pay for the work to get that done, but that is a big, I mean, that's an additional $5 million roughly to get them back to 9.5. So that's a big thing.
I also think that's sort of part of the school construction conversation that we're having in finance.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bill on our wall in finance, and then there's part of the big education transformation bill. It creates a school construction program, and funds it and provides positions in AOE. So it seems to me that we don't want to be giving A&R money outside of, I don't know, it seems to me it needs to be coordinated. That we especially as we're thinking about spending a lot of money on school construction. And I also hear you that we have schools scared a lot of schools and done this so badly over the last few years, in large part because of the Senate and our bad decisions in the Senate. So I'd like to help those schools, but I think it should be coordinated with a larger school construction conversation.
That is really good to know.
I think so that the school construction conversation is not gonna hit the ground for a year or 2, and this is for this year. And I've seen what's going on in some schools where they're having to do this work, and it's amazing. So I think this money is to get through starting July 1 this year, and so we should probably be thinking about it that way. And I don't know what all the tensions were in the House when they made the decision. We can't, I just know what all the tensions were, but I certainly believe that we've started this train of thought. I just have no idea what. Like for all of these, the conservation district ask is totally reasonable. 3 million, it's not in this budget climate. I don't know, it's hard to parse down. We got to a place, I think. I don't know what we'll do with this one, because nothing is enough. And so I don't know, but I think we do need to just.
I wonder if we
could think about it, putting it back to the government, recommend 9 with whatever.
Yeah, I also wonder if we could put in there, you know, that this is a priority, but it makes sense to also coordinate it with. Acknowledge that there may be some interplay with the school construction.
I don't feel comfortable putting this in our budget memo when we've taken zero testimony on it.
Yeah.
It's not really our jurisdiction. You know, you should talk with Senator Gulick, who is an expert on this topic. She's done a ton of work on this and really has a feel for what's happening in schools. And, I just don't feel like if we've taken no testimony on things, we took testimony on the other three things that we're talking about, and this we haven't, and it's not really our area. Jurisdiction.
That makes sense to me for now. I think it's worth more conversation, and this is one that I'm happy to just put a pin in for now, and especially as it pertains to it sounds like there's other things happening on this,
But there's other things happening on school construction.
Right, exactly.
And I mean, I can certainly talk with Senator Gulick, who's done a lot of work on this, you know, has, you know, a lot of information and has heard a lot of testimony on it.
Fair enough, thank you. Do you want to move to some of these other pieces? I don't know how S29 is gonna go. I know they're taking good testimony in judiciary right now about chloride, that bill, and so we're waiting to see what their thoughts are on moving that forward. But it may make sense for us to say, in whatever form S29 happens, if there is appropriations associated, we want to prioritize that. Is any objections to that?
No, I think we passed that bill, that has to be one of our priorities, and the fact that it's stuck in judiciary is frustrating, but I think you should include how the bill left our.
How it left us.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, like that's fair. And then 319, I put that in there because we had talked about the possibility of adding some money to that bill. You know, especially with our question this morning about, you know, if adding more staffing would have gotten them to do those, or, you know, accomplish those deadlines any faster. Sounded like that was not the case. If we wanted to bake in any of this extra funding, particularly like for the treasurer's work into 319, we could do that. That would be one option for us. But if we're going to list the treasurer's work on the climate super fund, we may not need to say 319 as well. That might be a little duplicative. Any thoughts on that? Adding any money or positions to 319?
I think we don't add money to it, we just put it in our budget letter, but if we want to add positions, I'm looking at this sort of unfunded mandate memo that the secretary put together. And I think she has in here for the Flood Safety Act a $500,000 gap necessary to bring the total appropriated to 2.25 million. So I guess this is where we just heard testimony that said, no, we don't need new money, but I guess that's really up to the secretary to make that call, so. It might be helpful to hear from her to see, because given the delays on everything in that act, if they could use, if the $500,000 would be helpful, it might be good to include it in our budget memo. Not necessarily the bill.
Right. Okay, so the $500,000 gap. We'll see if we can get either Secretary Moore or some commentary on that. Particularly tomorrow, because I'd like to be voting this out tomorrow, latest. These are well, another possibility is that I can work this up and we could just touch base briefly after, because I don't know that we need an actual vote, just some kind of straw poll approval, I think would probably suffice. And it would not be that hard to put that together. Any other thoughts? So I've got S29 in there as we passed it. I'm gonna move the conservation districts out of the nonprofit section. Any other things folks want to advocate?
Can we just double check our list, see if we have the same thing?
Yes.
I had another stuff, we decided when we would serve, word.
Yeah, I mean, they do good work.
As I recall, they leverage this money up to about 10 million for grants and the things that. And this is the sort of stabilizes it underneath.
How much do they get on their base right now?
That I don't know, but we do have someone from Serve Learner. Can you answer the question?
Yeah, Kate Kaufman, Director of Start a Learner. Currently, we have 500,000 in the base.
Okay.
So then just, we're talking that you're talking about going from 500,000 to 2.5?
So we currently have a total of $2 million in funding this fiscal year. And so we're asking for level funding. So that would include a one-time 1.5 million, or we would also love to see an increase in our base funding too.
Is that ARPA money that you have? Is that why you have so much more money this year?
No, it's just been one-time appropriations. I'm not sure actually if it's ARPA money, but we have had funding for 4 years, fluctuating between around 2 million.
As our money. Which we have no more of.
Yeah.
So I think going up to 2.5 million is just gonna be unrealistic, but we could say adding 250 to their base, and so that they have a base of 750.
At 250 to base.
Yeah. And so it's not one-time money, it's base money, but it's much smaller, yeah.
But once, base funding is a valuable thing. Okay. So I'm gonna just make sure that I have all my notes here. Okay, so I have got six things on my list to include.
Me too.
Okay, this is a good sign. Do you want to go through what you have, or should I can go through mine?
Go ahead.
Anyway, so in no particular order, the one we just talked about, adding 250 to the base for Serve, Learn, Earn. Doubling conservation districts to 1.2 to whatever the decimals are, roughly 1.2 million. And I don't know if we talked about base or, I think we did talk about that as base, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just kind of made a note of that. Another thing, the money for the LURB, one base, one limited service position totaling 145,000 plus another 100,000 for the digital infrastructure. Keeping in the language about S29 as we passed it. And then a sixth thing being checking in on the gap that DEC identified with the Flood Safety Act at 500,000.
Yes.
Okay.
What is the super fund amount?
Oh, did I?
Treasurers, do you remember?
So the modeling was 700,000, and then it's an additional 125 for a position, so it was a total of
825, cause that, I will say, they did say that could be lower, that 700 was kind of. So I might suggest that we go down to 500,000 instead of 700,000, so it's like 625 total. Cause 700,000 to hire a consultant is super rich, and 500,000 is even kind of rich, so. Clearly they're coming in and asking for a lot, and it's expensive to hire science and tech consultants, to be fair. It really is, but I think 500,000 is a totally reasonable amount.
And wasn't some of the rationale for less money that could be go beyond 1 year and be built into the next, because I think they made a real case for a total of 700, but I think they said that having over the course of 2 years would be okay. I'm not sure about that.
I don't remember that part
Okay.
of it, but I know we had talked about the possibility of grants or finding other support.
Yeah,
to-
and then I think they also said that, you know, they don't know how much it's going to be, they have to put it out to bid and then we'd see, you know. But 700 would definitely cover it, you know, a little bit less, and I just think $500,000 is plenty. And you know, if they end up needing more, they can always come and ask for more, but, and this would be one time, or, you know, one time
Mhm,
for a consultant.
mhm.
So I think 625 is total is plenty.
Okay. Thoughts on that? Okay. Okay, great, so, you know, work this up, and this, so this is helpful too, in that we can put together the majority of this, and then we can hold off on voting this until we get a little bit more information, till tomorrow about, this gap in the, in DEC's funding for the Flood Safety Act. So we'll fit this into the agenda tomorrow, and, I'll have a new draft for you to look at later today. Okay, thanks everybody, thanks for working through that, appreciate your patience, through that. And with that, we, will adjourn.